The number my mother gave me was $47,200. She told me that every birthday, every Christmas, every time she handed me a card with a crisp 20 tucked inside and said, "I put a little extra in your account this month, sweetheart." She said it the way some mothers say, "I love you," often enough that I stopped hearing it, stopped thinking about what it meant, stopped doing the mental math. It was just a fact of my life. The way the water pressure in our house was always slightly too low, and the microwave always beeped 3 times when it was done, and my brother always got the bigger piece of cake. $47,200. I found out it was gone on a Tuesday in October. 17 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open to the Common app and a bowl of cereal going soggy beside my elbow. My mother walked in, set a cup of tea she hadn't asked if I wanted next to my arm, and said in the voice she used to tell us dinner was ready, "I need to talk to you about something." She sat down across from me. She folded her hands on the table, and she told me, every single penny gone. She said she was sorry. She said it had been an emergency, more than one actually. She said she would pay it back. Absolutely, she was working on a plan. She said a lot of things, but the thing she said that still lives in me, the one that surfaces at strange hours, sitting in traffic, waiting for coffee to brew in that hollow space right before sleep, was the last thing. The quiet little ask at the end of all the explanations. "Please don't tell your father." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, looking at her hands, which were still folded on the table, perfectly, deliberately still. And I thought one single thought with complete clarity. She rehearsed this. That thought was worse than any of the others. Before I go any further, if you're new here, please subscribe. I share real stories every week, the kind that usually only get whispered about in parking lots and therapists' offices, about real families, real betrayal, and what survival actually looks like when it's not a movie. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from, because this community stretches from small towns in Ohio to flats in East London to apartments in Vancouver, and I genuinely want to know where you are. Okay. Back to the kitchen table. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 24 now, living in Columbus, Ohio, working as a paralegal at a small family law firm, which is either deeply poetic or just on brand, depending on how you look at it. I grew up in a suburb of Pittsburgh, the kind of neighborhood where every house has a garage that nobody actually parks in, and every front yard has exactly one tree planted when the development went up in 1987. Our house was a 3-bedroom split level with a finished basement and a kitchen that always smelled like something baking, even when nothing was. My mother was extraordinary at that, creating warmth, manufacturing the sensation of a safe place. She could walk into a room and make it feel like a home just by standing in it. I want to tell you who I was, so you understand what was taken. I was a good student, not the effortless kind. I was the color-coded planner kind, the extra credit kind, the girl who cried once in the bathroom of the school library because she got a B+ on an AP history essay, and the teacher had written, "Good analysis needs stronger thesis" in red pen, and I'd wanted it to be great. I cared things with a specific, almost inconvenient intensity. My teachers liked me. I was the reliable kind of quiet. I showed up, I followed through, I never made a scene, I could be trusted with things. I was the girl adults described as mature for her age, which is a compliment that, looking back, I now understand was partially just a way of saying, she won't cause us problems. And then there was Marcus. My brother was 2 years older than me. Is 2 years older. He's still alive. I need to say that. This isn't that kind of story. Marcus was the kind of person who made a room louder just by walking into it. Not obnoxiously, but genuinely. He remembered your coffee order. He asked about your dog. He could make a stranger at a gas station laugh inside of 45 seconds. People loved him the way people love a fire on a cold night. It feels so good to be near it that you don't always notice when it's using up all the air. He was also the kind of person things happened to. Opportunities evaporated, plans fell through. A business he'd been excited about for months would quietly dissolve, and he'd be on to the next thing before the dust had settled. Not because Marcus was careless, he wasn't stupid. He was actually sharp in a way he rarely got credit for, but because he moved through the world expecting the net to be there. He'd always been caught before. He just kept jumping. There was a desk in our den, old oak, solid, with a broken bottom drawer my dad had meant to fix since I was in second grade. I did my homework at that desk for years, and when I was 14, maybe 14 and a half, I was looking for a stapler, and instead I found a birthday card tucked under a stack of old car insurance papers, the kind of card a bank sends when they open a savings account for a minor. It had my name on it, Claire M. Donovan. There was an account number, a routing number, a logo from a regional bank that had since been absorbed into a larger one. I looked at it for about 10 seconds. I put it back exactly where I'd found it. I don't know why I remember that. I don't know why the specific weight of it still lives in my fingertips, that glossy cardstock. But it does. We weren't rich. My dad drove a truck for a medical supply company. Steady, benefits, not glamorous. My mother did administrative work for a pediatric dental office. We weren't struggling, but money was a thing in our house. You were aware of it. New clothes happened twice a year. Vacations were road trips to state parks, the kind where everyone sleeps in the same motel room and someone gets assigned the cot. When I was 12 and wanted dance lessons, my mother sat me down very gently and explained that it wasn't in the budget right now, but the college fund was growing, and by the time I was ready for school, I wouldn't have to worry about that piece of it at least. She said, "You won't have to worry." I think about that sentence at least once a week. Marcus graduated high school 2 years before me with an acceptance to Penn State and deferred almost immediately. He had a business idea, drop shipping, he explained to my dad at dinner, which my dad listened to with the patient, unreadable face he used when he wasn't sure whether to be hopeful or worried. My mother was enthusiastic. She believed in Marcus, the way certain mothers believe in their sons, completely, in a way that looks from the outside like love, but functions sometimes more like weather, omnipresent, atmospheric, impossible to argue with. The drop shipping thing lasted 6 months. Then there was a landscaping company he started with a friend from high school. That lasted 1 full summer and into the following fall, and for a while it actually seemed like it might work. Marcus came home sunburned and tired in the evenings, and there was something in his face during that period that looked like purpose. I remember thinking, maybe this is the one. Maybe this sticks. Then the friend had some kind of falling out with Marcus about money. I heard them once through the basement ceiling, a tight, muffled argument, the specific tonal quality of two people trying to be quiet while saying things that couldn't be unsaid. And by November, the company had been dissolved, and Marcus was back to the dining room table with his laptop, starting over. Then there was a period where he was getting into real estate, which from the outside looked mostly like watching YouTube videos and listening to podcasts on his headphones and occasionally printing things out on my dad's printer. He went to a networking event in downtown Pittsburgh once, came home wearing a suit jacket he'd borrowed from my dad, hung it back up without a word about where he'd been. I asked him how it went, and he said, Good. I think there are some real connections there." And there never was another word about it. Then there was a girl in Philadelphia. He drove down every other weekend for about 4 months. When that ended, he didn't tell anyone directly. You just noticed he'd stopped making the drive, and the subject hung in the air at family dinners for a while before quietly disappearing. My mother was steady through all of it, patient in a way I had genuinely, sincerely admired. Nothing seemed to rattle her faith in him. Every time something fell through, she was there. A meal, a conversation, whatever form encouragement took that week. She had this remarkable consistency of warmth toward him, this absolute, unshakable absence of frustration, and I thought it was just how she was. Patient, generous, the best version of a mother. I noticed things, if I'm being honest. Small things I filed under just how Marcus is. I noticed that he never seemed to run out of money exactly, that he always had gas and usually had spending money and never seemed to be in the acute distress that his situation, financially, probably warranted. I noticed once when I was 16 that my mother had a new coat. Nice, the kind of nice that was slightly out of range for how carefully she usually spent. And then the coat disappeared from the closet after about 2 weeks, and she never wore it again. And when I asked once where her new coat was, she said, "Oh, I returned it. It wasn't quite right." And I accepted that completely. I notice all of these things now. In the archive of my memory, they are lit differently than they were when they happened. I didn't know about the money. That is the thing I have to sit with still. Because there are versions of this story where I was watching it happen and choosing not to see it, and I've had to be very honest with myself about whether that was true. I don't think it was. I wasn't watching the finances. I wasn't paying attention to the bank account with my name on it. Why would I be? I was doing high school. I was getting the color-coded planner ready for senior year. The money was background, a fact, a given, a floor beneath my feet that I assumed would hold. Except for one night in the basement. I was 16, just turned, and Marcus and I were watching TV down there after dinner, some cop procedural that neither of us were really paying attention to. Out of nowhere, during a commercial, he said, "Mom's been incredible lately, like genuinely. I don't know what I'd be doing without her." I said, "She's great." He glanced at me. One sideways look, just for a second, a flicker of something I couldn't read. Then he looked back at the screen. I thought nothing of it. You know that feeling when you replay a memory and you can see the thing you missed, plain as anything, and you want to reach back through time and shake yourself? I've replayed that moment more than I can count. That look, that small, strange hesitation, the thing he knew and I didn't. I thought nothing of it. Senior year, I had my future laid out in careful columns. Political science, pre-law. Ohio State was the dream, close enough to home that I could get back quickly if I needed to, big enough that I could disappear into it. I'd been building a list of schools since sophomore year, ranking them, calculating costs, drafting essays in a notebook before I ever opened an actual application. I knew what I wanted, I was ready, and I was certain, the way you're certain about a fact you've never had reason to question, that I had the money to do it. The summer before senior year, I asked my mother once if I should start looking at financial aid applications anyway, or if the fund would mostly cover it. She was folding laundry in the upstairs hallway. She didn't stop folding. She said, "We'll talk about it once your applications are in." I didn't push. That was a mistake. But she had always managed the family finances, and I had never had reason to distrust her. Not about this. Not about me. So I tucked it away and went back to my planner. September, October, 4 applications nearly complete, and then that Tuesday, and the cereal, and her folded hands. She explained it in order, methodically, the way she would have explained a recipe she'd followed. Marcus's rent, when he couldn't cover it, a car repair, an unexpected one on a car that had technically been the family's second car, but that he was driving, credit card debt that had gotten away from him. She used that phrase, gotten away, as if it were a stray animal, as if it hadn't been a series of choices. And then the last item on the list, delivered almost as an afterthought, a food truck. Marcus had been given an opportunity to buy into a food truck operation with a friend. It had seemed like a real chance, she said, a concrete business with an actual product. She'd believed in it. I want you to sit with that for a moment. I really do. My college fund went in meaningful part toward a food truck. How much is left? I said. She looked at the table. I asked again. I transferred the last of it in June. June? The month I'd bought my new planner. The month I'd started a reading list of books about constitutional law because I was that person. I was absolutely that person. 4 months ago, while I was presumably color-coding something, my mother had finished emptying the account with my name on it. "You'll need to apply for financial aid," she said. Her voice was careful, measured. "Your grades are excellent, Claire. You'll qualify for a lot." I said nothing. "There are loans. Everyone takes loans. It's manageable. It really is." "How long?" I said. She stopped. "How long were you taking from it?" A pause. "It started about 3 years ago." 3 years? Since I was 14. Since around the time I found that birthday card in the oak desk drawer and put it back and thought nothing of it. "And don't tell your father," she said. "He doesn't know about the transfers. He thinks the fund is still intact." There it was, the full weight of it arriving last. Not just the theft, and let me be honest about that word because it took me about 2 years to use it, and I think it's the accurate one. Not just the theft, but the promotion. Now you hold this too. Now you are complicit. Now you are part of keeping the peace that I broke. I closed my laptop. I carried my cereal bowl to the sink. I rinsed it. I placed it on the drying rack. I walked upstairs. I closed my door. I sat on the edge of my bed, and I looked at my hands for a very long time. I didn't cry until around 2 in the morning, and even then it wasn't the kind of crying that releases anything. It was the mechanical kind, the kind where your body does what it needs to do while your brain watches from somewhere slightly outside of itself. I cried, and then I stopped, and then I lay very still and listened to the house, which was completely silent. And I thought about the number 47,200 until it stopped feeling like a number and started feeling like a duration, like a measurement of something I couldn't name. In the morning, I went to school. I sat through AP Government. I ate half a sandwich at lunch. I came home. I did what she asked. I said nothing to my father. I told myself it was because I needed time. That was partially true. I needed to understand what the financial landscape actually looked like before I could begin to navigate it. I was not a person who moved before she understood her terrain. But the other reason was simpler and uglier. I was scared. Not of my father, of what would happen to the house, to the family, to the version of my life where I still had parents who were together and a home I could come back to. I was 17 years old, and I had been handed a grenade and asked to just hold it for a while. And what I didn't understand yet was that holding it was also a kind of damage. I kept her secret for 6 weeks. In those 6 weeks, I became an expert in things no 17-year-old need to be an expert in. FAFSA, expected family contribution, the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loans, the specific architecture of a financial aid package and how the numbers in one column offset the numbers in another. I sat at my desk, the desk I'd had since middle school, the one with the sticker residue on the left side from a phase I'd had in 5th grade, and I built a spreadsheet at 11 at night, cross-referencing aid packages with tuition numbers, and I cried once at the spreadsheet, and then I put the crying away and kept working, because that was what I knew how to do. That had always been what I knew how to do. The specific loneliness of those 6 weeks is hard to describe. I went to school every day. I ate lunch with my friends, who were all in the middle of their own application stress and wanted to talk about essays and campus visits and which schools had the best dining halls. And I participated in those conversations, fully. Laughed at the right moments, complained about the Common App like everyone else. At no point did I tell any of them what was happening because I'd been asked not to, and because I didn't yet know how to say, "My mother took my future," and asked like it didn't happen. There were moments at a crowded lunch table, walking to class, lying in bed at night, when I felt something I can only describe as a very strange doubling, like I was two people at once. The girl who was present and functional and fine, and the girl who was sitting on a secret that was slowly changing the shape of everything around it, like a stone dropped in water, the ripples just beginning. Mrs. O'Coffer, when I finally went to her, was the only person who made me feel capable instead of abandoned. She didn't push for details. She just sat across her desk from me with her reading glasses on top of her head and helped me figure out the next step, and then the next one, and then the one after that. I've thought about her so many times since. The way she treated every question like it was worth answering. The way she acted like fixing this was just a matter of finding the right path through, which, it turned out, it mostly was. Not the path I'd planned, but a path. Ohio State offered me a partial academic scholarship. It helped. It wasn't enough. I applied to 22 scholarships. 22. I have the spreadsheet still. I wrote essays about resilience and leadership and my vision for my future with a particular grim efficiency because writing about hope felt almost ironic from where I was sitting. Some I got. Most I didn't. My father noticed something was wrong with me. He's perceptive, quiet, methodical, the kind of person who processes slowly but processes deeply. He asked me at dinner one night if everything was okay. I said yes, just college stress. He passed me the bread. I looked at my mother across the table. She was eating her salad like it was a normal Tuesday evening in a normal life. Fork to mouth, smile at my father's comment about something at work. The absolute normalcy of her face made something in me close off, the way a door that's been left open finally swings shut. That was the moment, though I didn't act on it for 2 more days. Thursday, after school, my mother's car wasn't in the driveway. I found my dad in the den, at the oak desk, doing exactly what he always did at that hour, going through the week's mail with a cup of coffee. I stood in the doorway for a moment. He looked up. "Got a minute?" I said. He set down the mail. I told him everything. The quiet that followed lasted a long time. He didn't move. He didn't react in the ways I'd feared he might. Didn't raise his voice, didn't go pale, didn't do any of the things that would have broken the careful hold I was keeping on myself. He just sat there and listened. And when I stopped talking, he said, "How long have you known?" 6 weeks. He nodded once. He stood up. He went to the kitchen and made himself a cup of coffee, even though he'd already had one and it was getting on toward 5 in the afternoon. He stood with his back to me for a while at the counter. Then he turned around and said, "I'm sorry this happened to you." Not, "I can't believe her," not, "I'll fix it," just, "I'm sorry this happened to you." That's the line that cracked me open. That single sentence, offered without drama, without any attempt to fix what couldn't be fixed right then. He saw me. That's all it was. He saw what had happened, and he named the loss without minimizing it. I cried. At the kitchen table, properly, for the second time in 6 weeks, and this time it wasn't mechanical. My dad sat across from me and didn't reach for me. We weren't that kind of family. But his presence was complete and steady, and that was enough. That was more than enough. My mother came home at 6:15. She walked in the door and saw my father's face, and she went still. Her keys were still in her hand. I want to be careful about how I describe what happened next, because memory does things to confrontations. It sharpens some edges and blurs others. And I want to be honest rather than dramatic. They didn't scream. They never did. What they did was speak to each other in the low, precise voices of two people who have been married for 23 years and know exactly how much the other can absorb. My mother said, "Claire told you." It wasn't a question. My dad said, "Yes." Silence. "The whole fund," he said. "I was going to pay it back. I was working on the whole thing, Carol." She set her keys on the counter. She sat at the table, the same chair, the same folded hands, and she said quietly, "He needed it. Every time it was real. He wasn't asking for indulgences. He was drowning, and She needed it," my dad said. "She planned her whole future around it. She has applications due this week." "I know." "Do you? Because you had her keeping your secret instead of working on her future." My mother looked at me. In her eyes was something I still can't fully decode. Guilt, yes, but also something almost like relief. Like the thing she'd been carrying had been set down at last, and even the pain of that was better than the weight. "I love you just as much as your brother," she said to me. I said, "I know." I meant it. That was the strange thing. I did know. The love was never the question. What I understood sitting in that kitchen with both my parents was something more precise and harder to name. That love and equity are not the same thing. That it is entirely possible to love two people genuinely, fully, and still move through the world as if one of them is more fragile, more in need, more central to your peace of mind. My mother had not stopped loving me. She had simply, consistently, for years, chosen him. Not out of malice, but out of something deep and automatic, the way people always choose the thing they most fear losing. I don't think she ever consciously thought of herself as taking from me. I think she thought of it as giving to him. I think those can both be true, and neither one excuses it. Marcus called me that night, about an hour after my father called him. I could tell from the first second that he hadn't known. There's a specific texture to genuine shock. It's quieter than people expect, slower, less performed, and his was real. "Claire, God, I'm so sorry." "I know." I didn't know where it was coming from. I knew she was helping me, but I didn't. He stopped. "I should have asked." "Probably," I said. "Does that make it worse, that I didn't ask?" I thought about it. "I don't know yet," I said. That was the most honest answer I had. The weeks that followed were the ugly, practical kind of hard. Not dramatic, just grinding. My father spent a weekend with a legal pad and a financial advisor he'd never needed before, mapping out what was real and what the path forward looked like. It wasn't good. There was no way to fully replace what had been taken before I needed it. My mother, without being asked, quietly sold her mother's pearl necklace and a set of matching earrings, jewelry she'd kept in a blue velvet box on her dresser my entire life, and handed my father an envelope. I only found out about the jewelry months later from my dad. She never mentioned it to me. I don't know if that was guilt or grace. Maybe both. I went to Ohio State. Partial scholarship, maximum loans, and a work-study job in the campus dining hall my first year, where I was up at 5:30 in the morning serving scrambled eggs to students who were still half asleep and occasionally, on the weekends, still clearly processing the night before. I wore a hairnet. I learned to make small talk with people who didn't make eye contact. I got very fast at loading the steam trays. It was fine. Better than fine, honestly. I'm not going to perform bitterness about it because it isn't real. I was there. I had gotten myself there, mostly on my own terms, and there is something clarifying about paying for the ground you're standing on. You don't drift in lectures. You don't miss the seminars. Every hour of class has weight because every hour of class has a dollar amount attached to it, and you know the dollar amount, and you know what you did to earn it. But I'd be lying if I said there weren't moments when I watched people my age move through college without any of this, without the early alarms and the hairnet and the spreadsheet I maintained of my loan balances, updated monthly, and didn't feel something. Not quite resentment, more like a specific, tired awareness. and understanding that I had been handed something heavier than other people were carrying, and that no one outside my family would ever quite see the shape of it. I called home every Sunday. My mother, my dad, sometimes both. The calls with my mother were careful in that first year, tidy and surface, the way conversations are when you've agreed, wordlessly, not to touch certain things. She asked about my classes. I asked about the dog, a beagle named Chester who had been in our family since I was 11 and who had the emotional intelligence of a very good therapist combined with the work ethic of none. She laughed at my Chester jokes. I laughed when she told me what my dad had done to the gutters. We were, in all the ways that could be observed, a normal mother and daughter. It cost me something, those calls. I didn't understand yet what they were costing or where the cost was going. My relationship with my mother moved through phases over those 4 years, the way seasons do. Distinct, predictable in structure, but the specific texture of each one always a little different than you'd anticipated. First year, a careful, polished surface. We talked every week. She asked about my classes. I asked about the dog. We were civil in the way that people are civil when the thing between them is too big to touch directly, but also too present to ignore. Second year was harder. Something unlocked that I hadn't been expecting. I started seeing Dr. Reeves, a therapist in Columbus, 50s, silver-framed reading glasses on a lanyard, the kind of unclinching attention that made the first few sessions feel like being lightly examined under a bright light. She didn't push, she just kept making space, and eventually things that I'd filed under dealt with turned out to be things I'd just filed. The anger came in the second year. Not hot and explosive. I'd never been built for that. Cold. A slow, constant simmer that surfaced in strange places. At a phone call with my mother that was perfectly pleasant and perfectly empty, and left me staring at the ceiling afterward with a terrible tightness in my chest. At a Thanksgiving dinner junior year, where Marcus mentioned something about a potential investment, and my mother's face did that thing. That particular brightening, that forward lean, and I put down my fork and excused myself to the bathroom and stood over the sink with the water running for 3 minutes. I was angry not just about the money. I was angry about the version of myself I was still carrying around. The 17-year-old girl who had been given a secret and asked to hold it, who had been trusted with the protection of a lie instead of being protected herself. I was angry that for 6 weeks I had gone to school and eaten lunch and done my homework while sitting on something that made all of it slightly unreal. I was angry that I had been the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who managed and planned and did everything right. And none of that had mattered. None of it had protected me. Dr. Reeves, when I finally said this out loud, didn't respond for a moment. Then she said, "What do you wish had been different about who you were?" I didn't have an answer for that. I still don't, not fully. I know I wouldn't want to be someone who didn't plan, who didn't care, who moved through the world assuming the net would hold. That would be less me. But I sat with her question for a long time, and I understood that being the reliable one had cost me something real. Not just in this one catastrophic way, in smaller, daily ways I'd never had language for. No one had ever worried about me the way they worried about Marcus. I had, apparently, been too competently okay. I had built a self that looked fine from every angle, and then I'd wondered why no one looked harder. There was also the law office, junior year, administrative at first, until my boss, a woman named Sandra, silver hair, unhurried precision, the kind of person who doesn't waste either time or words, started giving me more to do. Just a brief dropped on my desk, an expectation in her look. I learned how legal documents told stories, what a clause protected, who it protected it from, what it said about the people who'd written it. I started to love that work in a way I hadn't expected to love anything. "Law school," Sandra said one afternoon, as a statement, not a suggestion. "I don't have the money," I said. She looked at me. "That's not actually the question you're asking yourself." She was right. I was asking something bigger, and the money question was just the version I'd been permitting myself. I graduated in 4 years, on time, with honors, at a ceremony my parents both attended. They sat next to each other. My mother cried. My dad took 17 photos with his phone and texted me one of them that night, captioned simply, "Proud." Marcus drove up from Pittsburgh in a car that was definitely not the one my mother had fixed, drove back the same day, and hugged me for longer than either of us expected. In the parking lot, before he got in the car, he said, "You did something hard." I said, "You helped." He said, "I got you there in the first place." "Marcus," he said, "I mean it." I said, "I know you do. Get in the car." He got in the car. He texted me from the road 3 hours later, "Proud of you doesn't cover it." I still have that text. The conversation with my mother, the real one, the one I'd been avoiding, was Christmas Eve. I was 22. My dad and Marcus had gone to bed. We were alone in the kitchen, the way we'd been alone in the kitchen that Tuesday in October 5 years before, and she started to say something she'd clearly rehearsed, and I put my hand up. "Can I go first?" I said. She nodded. Her hands were wrapped around her mug, still. I told her all of it. Not the facts, she knew the facts, the texture, what it had been like to be 17 and find out that the thing you'd been building your future on was gone, what it had cost me to keep her secret, what the anger had felt like in my second year of college, not the anger I'd shown anyone, the cold, daily kind, the specific grief of knowing bone deep that I had been the responsible one and none of it had mattered. The way I'd written scholarship essays about resilience while sitting on a lie she handed me and said, "Hold this." And the thing that was hardest to say, the one I'd said to no one, that it wasn't the money, finally. The money was terrible, the money was real, the money had consequences that are still unwinding. But underneath the money was a question I'd been afraid to ask for 5 years. Did you know what you were doing to me? And did you do it anyway? My mother didn't say anything for a long time. When she started to cry, it wasn't composed. It was the way people cry when something has been held back for too long and the container finally failed. She pressed the back of her mouth and she cried, and I watched her, and I didn't look away. When she could speak, she said, "I told myself it wasn't taking from you because it was still in the family. I kept saying that to myself. It's still in the family. She'll understand someday. I'll pay it back before she needs it." She stopped. I was lying to myself long before I was lying to you. I said, "I know." She said, "I thought he was going to fall apart. I was so scared he was going to fall apart, and you were—" She stopped again. "I was fine," I said. "You were always fine." There it was. The thing that was true, and also the thing that made it possible. I was always fine. I had always been fine. I had been so reliably, thoroughly fine that it was easy to believe I didn't need what Marcus needed. Not because my mother loved me less, but because I never showed her that I needed saving. I had been so good at not needing saving. She said, "I thought that was a compliment, watching you handle things. I was proud of you." I said, "I know you were. I also needed to be let off the hook sometimes, and I didn't know how to ask for that, and you didn't know to offer it." She nodded. Then she said, "I'm so proud of who you've become." "I know, Mom. Can you ever—" She stopped. "I'm working on it," I said. "That's honest." She nodded again. She didn't push. That was the right call. I have been working on it. 24 now, loans partially paid, a job I care about, law school applications sitting on a metaphorical back burner that is getting warmer by the month. My relationship with my mother is real in a way it wasn't for a while. Not the curated surface version from my first 2 years of college, not the armed truce of my second two. Real. We have brunch sometimes when she comes to Columbus at an Italian place on 4th Street that doesn't technically do Italian brunch, but makes a good Eggs Benedict and lets you sit as long as you want. We talk about real things. Not everything, but real things. My dad and I are closer than we've ever been. He calls every Sunday. We talk about work, about news, about whether the Steelers are going to do anything worth watching this season. He never brings up what happened unless I do. When I do, he listens. Marcus is engaged to a woman named Priya, who I like enormously, who has a dry humor and an extremely organized spice cabinet, and who has no idea about any of this and doesn't need to. She makes him better, I think. Not in a he was broken way, just in the way good partners do, which is that she sees him clearly and loves him anyway, and doesn't let things slide that shouldn't slide. She's good for him. He's good for her. The food truck, for the record, failed after 14 months. I found out through Marcus, offhandedly, maybe a year and a half after the fact, and I sat with that information for a moment and felt something I am not fully proud of. A cold, precise satisfaction. I'd been right. The whole thing had been a bad investment made with money that wasn't my mother's to invest, and it had failed. That feeling lasted about 30 seconds. Then I put it down. It didn't do anything useful, and I was tired of holding useless things. Last 4th of July, Marcus and I were outside on my parents' back steps after the fireworks. Everyone else inside, the way it goes when a holiday goes on just long enough that you end up on the back steps without quite meaning to. The night was warm, that full dark July warm that feels different than any other season's night. Fireflies in the yard. There are always fireflies in July in that backyard. It's one of those things I've realized only in adulthood that I love about where I grew up. He said, "I feel like I owe you something I don't know how to pay back." I said, "You don't." "Claire, I mean it. You didn't steal from me. She gave you something that wasn't hers to give. That's a different thing." He was quiet for a while. "I needed you to be the bad guy for a while," I said. "It was easier." Was I the bad guy? I actually thought about it. Not the performed consideration, the real kind. "No," I said. "You were just Marcus, doing what you'd always done. She was the one who knew what she was spending." He let out a long breath. Not quite a sigh, something more like something releasing. "I'm sorry you went through what you went through," he said. "I know." I watched a firefly describe a small, bright arc near the fence. "I'm okay, Marcus." "I know you are. That's not the same as it being okay that it happened." That stopped me. That was, I don't know, that was the right sentence. I didn't tell him that, but it was. We sat there until the fireflies thinned out and the air started to cool, and we didn't talk about it anymore. We talked about Priya's job, and whether my dad needed to get his roof looked at, and whether any of the neighbors had sold. Normal things. Family things. I drove home that night thinking about something Dr. Reeves had said to me years ago in one of our last sessions. She'd said, "At some point, the story you've been telling yourself about what happened has to make room for the story of what happens next. Not because the first story wasn't real, it was, but because the person you're becoming doesn't fit inside it anymore." I'm still figuring out what happens next. There's a photo on my refrigerator. My mother put it there during one of her Columbus visits, part of the quiet, persistent campaign she wages to make herself present in my space without overstepping. It's from when I was 10. Marcus and I are in the backyard in summer, both of us squinting into the sun, mid-laugh at something off camera. We look unreservedly happy. The uncomplicated kind, the kind you don't know you're losing when you're still living inside it. I leave it there. I've had moments where I thought about taking it down, and I never have. I think I leave it there because it's true. That picture as true as everything else. The two children in that photograph existed. That afternoon existed. My mother took that picture, and she loved us both. I know she did. I've never doubted that. And all of the rest of it is also true. And somehow I have to live in the space where both things fit without letting go of either. The number was $47,200. I know it like I know my own address, my own phone number, the sound of my father's voice on a Sunday morning. It lives in me now like the important numbers do, quietly, permanently, as much a part of my geography as anything else. But it isn't the whole map. I learned something in those years. Not a lesson I could have been taught, the kind you get pressed into you by the weight of what you lived through. I know the difference between being loved and being considered. I know the cost of other people's secrets. I know that the most dangerous lies are the ones told out of love, because those are the ones where the person lying genuinely believes they're protecting you, and you have to figure out how to be angry at someone who meant well and still caused wreckage. I know that I'm built out of the money I didn't have and the jobs I worked to fill the gap, and I'm not sure if that's a tragedy or just a life. Probably it's both. On the night before I started my first day of college, I sat in my dorm room at Ohio State, small, carpeted in the standard industrial beige, smelling of industrial cleaning product and the particular newness of an unmade bed, and I thought about being 17 at the kitchen table, and the cereal going soggy, and the number. And I thought, I'm here anyway. I'm still here. That's the thing that doesn't fit neatly into a lesson, that resists the packaging. I'm here, in spite of it, because of it, tangled up in all of it in ways I'm still sorting out at 24 and will probably still be sorting out at 44. The fireflies in July, my dad's voice on Sundays, Prius spice cabinet, Marcus on the back steps saying the exact right-wrong thing in the exact right way. That photo on my refrigerator, I leave it there.